Hi, my name is Rachel. I'm a therapist with HFM Behavioral Health in association with Freighter and the Medical College of Wisconsin. I'm coming to you today to tell you a little bit about mental health care. So some of the things I want to address are what it is, a little bit about the background for therapists versus psychologists versus psychiatrists, because I know that that can get really confusing and sometimes kind of overwhelming. And then I'm just going to give a couple points in what we can do either professionally or personally to get ourselves in a better place, and maybe figure out whether or not what we have going on or how we're dealing with things is something we can take care of on our own, or if maybe we need to look a little further than that. So hopefully this video is helpful. And at the end, I'm going to provide a couple of resources for our clinic as well as other clinics if you're unable to get in here, and then my personal email as well to reach out with questions. So hopefully this is helpful for you. What I do is I do very similar traditional therapy as to what you would see in an office setting, and what that can look like is many different things. So people can come to therapy for varied reasons. Sometimes it might be because their parents are going through a divorce. There could be lots of stress, anxiety. With the time in the world we're at right now, sometimes it's people with health concerns. Sometimes it's because somebody that they've been very close to has passed and they just need a way to talk it through and process a little bit. So basically with my role, I can guide, I can help give coping skills, I can be an ear to listen where you're not going to get judged and you're not going to be told you're crazy. That's one misconception that I've heard in the past, is people feel like if you need to see a counselor, you're crazy. And that's really not what it is. It's support. Again, support and guidance. Part of counseling, and if you've never been on the counseling journey before, is finding a good fit. So just like everybody else is individuals, counselors are individuals ourselves. We have different likes and dislikes. And even though we're not going to judge, we have different personalities. So sometimes when a person engages in counseling the first time, it might just not be a good fit for whatever reason. Maybe the counselor is not quite able to understand where you're coming from, or the things that they give you just aren't helpful, and that's okay. So it's really important to know when somebody's engaging with counseling that A, you're not crazy, and B, you're not stuck with the person that you do an intake with. In my role in the schools, it's a little bit different in that if somebody wants to be in the school-based mental health in the middle schools, I'm the only person there. So you're stuck with me if you want to do it in the schools. At the high school, we do have another therapist working with me as well. So you have two options there. And outside of that, there are plenty of community mental health clinics and many different ones, and I can certainly provide a list of that as well for people to look for. You can always just go online too and search. So that's a resource that's going to be available to you because again, there are many options. Something that I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about today too is just a background of what makes somebody a therapist. Before I started school for this, and a little bit into the process, I thought that it was something you do with a 4-year degree. Just so you're aware, if you go and you see a counselor, it is actually going to be a master's degree. So we had to do 4-year college plus a little bit of schooling after that. Kind of a 2 to 3 year program and internship depending on specifically the program that we went through. If somebody goes and sees a psychologist, that's a little bit different. A psychologist doesn't prescribe medications, but they have a doctorate, so they can do psychological testing. In the Manitowoc School District, it's Mr. Kohler and Mr. Redwine that does that, where they do some of the specialized testing. That's something a counselor does not necessarily do. The other part in the mental health field then too is a psychiatrist. They're the ones that prescribe. So they're the ones that are either medical doctors or DOs or nurse practitioners who do medical training, and then they go on and they do psychological training to be able to prescribe that. So those are the 3 different levels of that. Sometimes when someone goes to, so if it's a psychiatrist, often it's going to be for several years, depending on what they're going through. It might be short term, it could just be a couple months for medications if it's like a little bit of anxiety and depression that they're working through until they can cope with it on their own. Sometimes it might be a little bit more serious mental health condition and they might need medications longer term just to stay stable, make sure that all the chemicals in their brains are where they need to be. when somebody engages in counseling, sometimes it's only 4 or 5 sessions. It might just be to get a little bit of insight, get a plan, get that little bit of support to get on track, and then away you go. Sometimes it's a little bit longer term, and that is depending on how well you're progressing with the goals that you've set up. It also could be depending on what you and your therapist decide, or if you feel like you're in a good place and choose not to come back. It's always in the person's hands, not in the therapist's hands necessarily. If someone is interested in coming to start with therapy, it is typically going to be calling the clinic. In the school-based setting, so with me or with Brett as well at Lincoln, it's contacting the school guidance counselor, talking to them. They can go ahead and get the paperwork sent home. Just so everybody listening to this is aware, it is a service that does have to be paid for unless insurance covers it completely. And that's something that our office or the office that you go to can discuss with your parents, or they can go ahead and get that set up and figure out what that would look like. That's something that therapists typically, or psychologists or psychiatrists, usually we don't deal a lot with the money stuff. That's something for others in the network to handle. A couple things that I wanted to address as well would be just a couple of coping skills, grounding skills for everybody watching this video today. So something that you get kind of as a freebie. It's just going to be a couple things that we can do now that we're adjusting to being back fully in person. I'm not sure about your individual experiences, but something I've observed, and from talking to students and talking to teachers, it seems like this year especially is really, really hard to get back in the swing of things and be around lots of other people, and the noise and the movement and just all of that that's entailed in a normal school day, quote unquote. So just a couple little tips that I have for you is, number one, smile. When we smile, or just even lift up the corners of our mouth, it tells our brains that things are okay. It helps us feel safer, and it helps us connect with others. So even just looking somebody in the eye and smiling at them can help them feel engaged, and it can help both of our body's stress systems to kind of balance each other out a little bit. So that's huge. If you're really having a bad day and you can't smile, as weird as it sounds, like taking a pen, stick it in your mouth, pulls up the corner muscles a little bit, it tells our brains that we feel a little bit better. It helps us get through some things. So it's number one is smile. Number two is going to be, again, that eye contact. When we're looking at somebody, when we're connecting, it really does help and makes a difference. Otherwise, it's also really, really important, especially if we're stressed, anxious, or worried, or all over the place. Instead of yelling at other people or going off on them or blaming them, it's really, really, really important that we take that step back and look at ourselves and figure out, okay, so what is it about me that I'm stressed or that I'm worried? Now, I say that not to blame ourselves. We don't want to go where we're beating ourselves up or feeling like we're doing something terrible. And it's often about the way that we see the situation and other things that have happened to us earlier in the day that cause us to have a response. So if we can take a step back and look at that big picture of, okay, so maybe I'm running on 3 hours of sleep because I had a lot of homework, or my dog was sick, or whatever else was going on in my life, I'm going to be a lot more irritable and things are going to get to me more. If I can do that and notice what part of that I can control, which is at the core, then I can choose to hopefully be a little more conscious of it and respond differently. So sometimes too, it'll be, I might go off on somebody, I might snap at someone, and then I'm gonna be able to hopefully take that step back and say, you know what, I'm really sorry, I haven't gotten a lot of sleep. I'm gonna let myself sigh, because when we sigh, it helps bring down our stress levels a little bit. I'm gonna look in the eye, make that contact. Okay, I'm gonna try to do better. And then I'm gonna try to figure out for myself what I can control. It's typically easier to look at somebody else and what they're doing wrong. So if we can pull back and look at ourselves, it helps. So versus looking at other students or teachers or school staff or parents or whoever else is around us, that really can make a big difference. And then just the last thing too is going to be to practice some form of relaxation. Now when I say relaxation, sometimes for people that means just kind of sitting around for hours on end and not doing anything. Well, that can be relaxing. There's such thing as focused relaxation. So it's going to be, I'm going to, as I'm taking that deep breath, notice my body and try to figure out, okay, Do I have parts of my body that are tense? Maybe my shoulders are pulled up to my ears, or maybe I feel like there's an elephant on my chest. When I have those things going on, I want to notice where that is, where I hold my tension, and I want to try to will my body, if you will, to relax. Sometimes that helps. Sometimes we might need to stretch it out a little bit. Maybe we need to hop on YouTube and find what are some stretches for this particular muscle because I just can't get it. And if we can relax our bodies, if we can get out the physical stress in our bodies, that muscle tightness, it helps our brains to relax, it helps us to be calmer, it helps us to make it through more things. And always, too, it's really, really important to talk to those around us and let people know what's going on. So again, if I'm really stressed and anxious, I'm going to try to work through it myself to some extent, and I want to reach out to others, and I want to try to get the help I can. If it's something that you've reached out to parents, teachers, other students, working on it yourself, and that's just not quite cutting it, it might be worth trying to go and talk to a professional. If nothing else, they might be able to help you figure out kind of is there something at the root of this that I'm just not quite getting, or maybe I need some skills, maybe I need to learn a couple things to help me get through it. That's just not enough from the natural supports in place. So again, then that would be going to guidance and talking to them, talking to your parents, and then we can go ahead, work out the details, and make sure that you get what you need. So I do apologize that I'm not there in person to answer questions. You most definitely can go ahead and email me. I will provide that email address to your teacher as well, and I'll do my best to go ahead and respond to those. So I hope this was helpful, and hopefully you can go ahead and use some of these. Thank you everybody for listening.